Emily Chang, and this is Bloomberg Technology. We are coming to you live from the Vanity Fair New Establishment Summit in San Francisco, where we're hearing from some of the most influential voices in technology and innovation shaping our future. This hour, we will hear from some of Silicon Valley's most candid tech leaders. We'll hear from Social Capital's Chamath Palihapitiya, Udacity founder Sebastian Thrun, inventor of the self-driving car, and Alibaba co-president Mike Evans. Plus, we'll dig into Microsoft with shares soaring in after-hours trading after the tech giant crushed it on earnings, and that is where we start. Microsoft shares popping over 6% in extended trading. The Windows company releasing better than expected results, buoyed by growing demand for cloud-based software and services. Revenue was over $22 billion, up 3% from the same quarter last year. The company had a net profit over $4.5 billion, up 2% year over year. CEO Satya Nadella has been investing in data centers and striking partnerships to bolster sales of Microsoft's main corporate cloud products like Azure and Office 365. Here to break down the numbers from our San Francisco studio, our editor-at-large, Corey Johnson. So, Corey, let's start with the turnaround plan at a high level. How is Satya Nadella's turnaround plan going?
Looks good. I mean, you know, we've seen a couple of quarters and increasingly improving results on the top line. Of course, the company continues to be a profit and free cash flow machine. But we see this sort of increasing level of revenue growth. The sort of second derivative of revenue growth is that the revenue is growing, and it's growing at a faster and faster rate, and that's exactly where they wanted to be, making these big changes while continuing to have some success with Windows and Office.
Let's talk about PCs. You know, obviously, so many questions around the future of the PC market. Intel actually reported strong results around PCs. What about Microsoft?
So Microsoft's results in the PC business were not great, but maybe not as bad as some had feared. About a negative 1.1% change, that is to say, declining by about 1% in PCs. And that could have been a lot worse. Of course, that's in the Windows market. That could have been a lot worse, particularly the third quarter, which can be the calendar third quarter, which can be so bumpy for this company. So going into Q4, we'll look to see how that might diverge. You know, of course, Intel, when they guided, they said fourth quarter because there was early ordering in the third quarter, calendar quarter. The fourth quarter might look a little light. No indication of the same from Microsoft. So we'll see how that plays out. But you know, usually when as goes Intel, goes the rest of the PC industry, and as goes Microsoft.
Let's dig into the cloud, because this is Satya Nadella's big bet. A lot of people saying this could be the future of Microsoft. How is cloud revenue shaping up versus the giant in the room, AWS, Amazon?
So the cloud business was fantastic for Microsoft. They reported on a year-over-year basis, they reported a substantial increase in their cloud business writ large, but especially in their Azure business. That's the business most comparable to Amazon Web Services. Indeed, in constant currency, they saw gains of 121%. But if you look at it quarter after quarter, what you actually see is an acceleration of that growth rate off of last quarter, the 108% growth. So 121% growth is really fantastic, even as that business is getting a lot bigger. And on a year-over-year basis, that's a giant number, or at least a giant percentage. We don't know the actual numbers. When you look at Amazon's percentage change on a year-over-year basis, it's growing at a much slower rate. Now, it's a much, much bigger business. Some estimates are at least 5 times as large. But when you look at Amazon Web Services, year-over-year growth rates, they're nowhere near as strong and indeed declining. Now, they'll happily take 58% when they're looking at such a big business. Nonetheless, Microsoft's growing at nearly twice that rate.
All right, our Bloomberg editor-at-large breaking it down. Corey Johnson, thank you so much for that update. Turning now to ride-hailing, Didi Chuxing has its eyes set on targets beyond China. Didi Chuxing President Jean Liu told me about the company's global ambitions earlier today right here at the Vanity Fair New Establishment Summit. Take a listen.
We're definitely going global. Every market is very, very different, so either through local partnership or, because we are a big sponsor and big believer in local players. We think there are a lot of local knowledge and, experience we can leverage local players. But if there are no existing local players, we'll consider to go by ourselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then we will see you compete with Uber in other markets.
We will play a global game.
Joining me now, Eric Newcomer, who covers Uber and Didi for us. What did you make of Jean's comments there?
It was really surprising. I mean, Didi just cut a deal with Uber to stop some of the bloodletting. Uber obviously left China, so I think Uber was certainly hoping, okay, Didi would be less global. So I thought it was surprising, though. as you know, Didi has ties to Grab, Ola, Lyft, so it has its global tentacles, but to say that Didi itself is a global company, I thought it was surprising.
It's so confusing to think about how exactly this partnership is going to work. You've got the founder of Didi on the Uber board. You've got Travis Kalanick, the CEO of Uber, a board observer at Didi. You've got Didi doubling down on their investments in Southeast Asia, where Uber is doubling down as well. And Didi has a partnership with Lyft, Uber's arch rival.
Yeah,
how does this work?
I don't know. I think to be determined. I think Lyft in particular, hard to understand whether Didi and Lyft are totally in sync right now. I don't think we've seen a lot of public acts of friendship since the Uber Didi deal. So I think that
John Zimmer of Lyft told us last week they're still in conversations with Didi about how this will all work.
Right, but Ola and Grab, I think there is an understanding that Didi and Uber are still sort of fighting, and both are, have global, Didi through its support of Grab and Ola, and Uber obviously operating in Southeast Asia and India, they remain competitive there. If it's right now a proxy war, I mean, for all we know, and this is speculative, I mean, Didi could have interest in one of those companies, or could see you could see them tying up. They share investors. Didi already has a stake, so it's something, as a reporter we're watching, but there's no indication right now that that's imminent.
John Zimmer of Lyft also told us Lyft is not for sale, though you have reported that they had at some point been looking for a buyer.
Yeah, they certainly had a lot of talks, and then they made a very public show of, we are not for sale. I mean, there's certainly a price that they floated. One publication said $9 billion. There have been sort of a lot of different prices thrown around for Lyft, but at the moment they're in a no. We're going it on our own. There's plenty of opportunity for us here in the United States.
I also asked Jean Liu about Apple, what exactly Apple will get out of this partnership. How is that going to work? What do you make of what she said, which was broadly, use your imagination. I said, well, I want to hear your imagination.
Yeah, I was going to jump on that quote. It was perfect. Like, if you're an interviewer. Yeah, she sort of ducked. I mean, I think the question on Apple has always been, was it a matter of Apple wanting a good relationship with the Chinese government and investing in a big Chinese company, or was it actual strategic interest? And she did say, our drivers use phones. You could imagine them using Apple phones. So I think, literally people were reading her both ways on that. And I think it could be a little bit of both, but it seems like, $1 billion investment is serious. So you could imagine Didi and Apple sort of tightening their connection over time.
And Apple has a seat on the Didi board. Eric Newcomer, who covers ride-sharing, it's still wartime, apparently, the ride-sharing wars. Eric Newcomer, thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, with great technological advancement comes great security concerns. We'll hear from DARPA Director Dr. Arati Prabhakar about the additional measures being taken. Plus, a reminder, all episodes of Bloomberg Tech are streaming live on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV, weekdays, 6 p.m. in New York, 3 p.m. in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg. on stock, we are watching Time Warner shares spiking on a Bloomberg News report that its executives met with AT&T in recent weeks about a possible merger. This, according to people familiar with the matter, who said Time Warner CEO Jeff Bewkes is willing to sell if he gets a fair offer. 2 years ago, Time Warner rejected a bid from 21st Century Fox that valued the company at more than $75 billion. And turning now to DARPA, or the U.S. Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which focuses on the ways that government agencies can utilize technology in coming years. The main theme behind the agency isn't about machines gaining control, but how humans and machines will work together. Joining us now, Arthi Prabhakar, Director of DARPA. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
And, you know, we always talk about DARPA in reference to self-driving cars because the original self-driving car came out of DARPA. But you do so much more. Your self-driving cars, self-driving ships, space. Talk to me about the most exciting projects that you're working on.
There's so many, but maybe just to pick the self-driving ship is a great place to start. A decade ago, we ran a big competition and asked people if they could build a car that could complete a course without a human being driving it. And if you want to find the people who won that competition and came in second and third, you'll find that they're out now driving it commercially, and all the companies that are going after that. So now, meanwhile, what we're off to the next set of challenges. So one of the things we're doing is that we just christened a few months ago a self-driving ship that's large enough and capable enough to leave from the pier and navigate across open oceans by itself. And we think this is going to give the Navy a way to do some really important jobs. Think about clearing mines from a harbor without putting sailors in harm's way. And I think that's just the beginning. We're going to be finding out what else we'll be able to do with them.
As you say, these are important jobs, and you know, with technology, there also comes warning. I mean, what are the security risks of technologically equipping our warships, our cars, and relying on technology more than ever?
Yeah, absolutely, and especially information technology. So we keep using more data and more computing systems and more networks because they are so valuable. That's true in our personal lives and our business lives, and it's certainly true for the military and national security. But with that comes more and more attack surface. So one of the things we've been working on is really asking the question, how do we win at cybersecurity? How do we take whole classes of vulnerabilities off the table? How do we develop machines that can help us scale cybersecurity? So our most recent big competition was the Cyber Grand Challenge, where we challenged people to build supercomputers that could look at software and figure out where the flaws were, build patches, identify flaws in their adversaries' code, and basically we built cyber war in a box and let these machines go at it, and they were very quickly able to start finding flaws, patching, and when you think about giving those kinds of tools to the humans that do cybersecurity, you can start to see how we really make some big advances.
You're also involved in online counterterrorism. Talk to us about how new technology can improve what exactly is happening online.
Yeah. I'll tell you a story that started with one of my program managers, Chris White, a few years ago. He went to a conference. He learned, to his horror and deep anger, that you can buy a human being for $90 in the world of human trafficking. He came back committed to doing something about that, and he started talking to our law enforcement colleagues, found that they were just searching the surface web that's indexed by Google or Bing, and so Chris set out to build tools for them that do domain-specific deep web search, looking at the deep web and the dark web, all the places that bad actors hide. Those tools are now being used by DA offices around the country to go after human trafficking, with hundreds of cases that they're investigating. So far, I think we're at 27 indictments and 3 convictions, and I hope there's a lot more ahead from that.
There are a lot of concerns about the dangers of new technology, about technology taking jobs, eliminating jobs. Yeah. You're on a panel today that's not called Man versus Machine, but Man meets Machine. What does that say about your viewpoint?
Well, I think it's the right question to ask, because the really interesting part about all this technology is what are we humans going to do with it? And we know the long arc of history says we're going to make amazing advances, and we're talking about all the potential of these technologies. We also know it's very disruptive, and we all experience that in our personal lives. I think we can see the impact it's having on employment, and so I think these are big challenges for us. We technologists need to be thinking about that, step that the whole country and the whole world needs to be thinking about and dealing with these disruptive changes so that we can get all those benefits.
All right, Dr. Arthi Prabhakar, you'll be on stage in just a moment. Head of DARPA, thank you so much for joining us today on Bloomberg Tech. Up next, we talk politics and the inner workings of Facebook with Social Capital founder Chamath Palihapitiya. This is Bloomberg. Facebook board member, PayPal co-founder, and famed venture capitalist Peter Thiel will give a speech in Washington October 31st to address the presidential election. This according to his spokesman. Thiel has become one of the most divisive figures in Silicon Valley for his public endorsement of Donald Trump. Take, for example, Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos' response on stage at the Vanity Fair summit earlier today.
Peter Thiel is a contrarian. First and foremost, he is a contrarian. And you just have to remember that contrarians are usually wrong.
Bezos went on to say that Trump is, quote, evading our democracy. Staying with politics, Bloomberg Tech's Brad Stone and I caught up with Social Capital founder Chamath Palihapitiya. As a former Facebook insider, we wanted to know how he thought Thiel's support for Trump might be sitting with the rest of the board. I started by asking him what's at stake on Election Day.
I think everything's at stake. You know, at the end of the day, I think there are two things that are going to get judged on November 8th. The first is just a subjective thought around the future of pluralism. Do we believe that a more inclusive, diverse set of people around the table are more capable of building a better off country? Or do we take a step back towards something that seems a little bit more oppressive? I think that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, do we believe in a future where the substantive quality of the person that's in a point of leadership versus someone that can market themselves, and can we see through those differences at the time of Election Day? And so I think those are issues that frankly transcend past 2016. So there's still a huge amount at stake.
Chamath, you're a fellow venture capitalist. Peter Thiel just contributed more than $1 million to the Donald Trump campaign. You've worked with Peter in the past. You said on stage here at the Vanity Fair New Establishment Summit that you would have a hard time working with him now. But I wonder, what do you think the impact will be for Peter, considering that this is an unpopular view to hold right now in Silicon Valley?
Well, look, one thing I'll say, I've known him for a long time, is that he's an extremely confident individual, and I think he thinks through issues quite deeply. And so there's a whole set of reasons that I don't frankly understand, because I haven't spent the time, to be fair, to understand how he's gotten to the point of view that he has. And so hopefully he has some broader mandate and agenda. Maybe it's hoping to see the rise of a third political party. I don't know. But personally for me, I find it really troublesome, and it doesn't map to my morals and ethics. And so, but I support his right to choose.
There's a debate right now about whether Y Combinator should kick him out of their partnership, whether Facebook should kick him off the board. You worked at Facebook for a really long time. What should these companies do? What should Mark do? What should Sam Altman do?
I think that they have to follow their moral and ethical framework of how they want to run those organizations. So I can't speak to what Facebook should do because I don't work there, and frankly, I'm not the dominant shareholder, nor can I speak to Y Combinator. I can speak to Social Capital. And look, we've decided that we're going to spend the time trying to create more equality for everybody and create a more bottoms-up world. And I think that is fundamentally about a positive view of inclusion and pluralism. And so I can't stand to work with people directly at Social Capital who would have views that have transcended politics, in my opinion, and have now entered this quite gray area that's bordering on hate. And I think that, for me, I would have a really difficult issue with it, but I can't.
So you would kick them off? You would kick him off?
For Social Capital, I think so. I mean, for example, like if it was Romney versus Obama, that's politics. I'm not so sure that this is politics anymore, and so I would have a real moral issue and ethical issue with keeping them.
Facebook executives and board members. Do you think this is a divisive issue?
I think it must be, and I think it must be a really difficult decision because I think they probably also want to create some semblance of fairness and the ability to have different choices. Because look, at the end of the day, this is a person who has been legitimized by many tens of millions of people, and so I think what we need to really do is take a step back and unpack where is the legitimacy in the movement. What does he represent that we can actually take away and say, these are things that we actually do need to fix for everybody? And I think that's probably what causes organizations like Facebook to be in a bit of a quandary.
So Peter Thiel obviously represents an extreme end of the spectrum, at least in Silicon Valley, at least likely among Facebook board members. Is that of any value to Facebook right now, or is that a detriment?
No, I think it is valuable. Like I said, I think the solution to this isn't to shut yourself off and only basically listen to people that think the same thing you do. I think the solution is you have to have people around the table. The question is, in what context are they around the table? And so, I think we have to unpack, should he have a voice? Absolutely. Does he have a right to do this? Absolutely. That is different, though, than what role should they play in either management or governance. And again, those are specific issues that I think come down to the people in those organizations deciding that.
The topic of Twitter came up this morning. Were you surprised that Disney and Google and Salesforce seemed to come up to perhaps an acquisition, but then stepped away?
No, and frankly, I think that there is no industrial logic for any of those companies to buy Twitter. I think Twitter is best left in the hands of a group of investors who can take it private, who can rationalize the technical infrastructure, who can clean up a lot of the abuse and spam, who can fix the employee morale problems, and then eventually take it back out, because I do think that it is an emerging pillar of communication in social media. It's an important part of the media landscape, and it should exist as an independent company, but right now it's in such a point of disrepair that I think we need to take a step back to fix it.
You have a hedge fund that is outperforming the average hedge fund. I know you're very long on Amazon. You've been very positive about Jeff Bezos. When you look at Amazon versus Facebook versus Google versus Apple, do you see a future where Amazon is, head and shoulders above the rest?
Absolutely. I mean, it is the most durable business being built anywhere in the world today. And
that says a lot, given your history with Facebook.
Absolutely. I mean, I think Facebook is a fantastic business. Facebook is about creating consumer intent and behavior. The problem with that is that those ebb and flow. We know that. So Facebook has done a fantastic job in acquiring these new sorts of expression that have emerged, but Amazon is in a fundamentally different business where it's this functional utility, and I think that they do such a good job that there is no emotional reconsideration that happens. At no point, I think, does a Prime subscriber think to themselves, I'm going to get in my car right now and drive to Target because that just makes me feel better. So that's just a very different set of problems. So as long as Amazon can continue to invest in the customer experience, then they will win. Facebook, unfortunately, will be in an evolving arms race where they have to constantly look to see what are the emergent behaviors that we don't understand or yet own, and then go and either build or buy those. It's a much harder problem to solve over 20 or 30 years.
That was Social Capital founder Chamath Palihapitiya. Still to come, with Tesla racing ahead to a driverless car future, where does that leave the likes of Google? We'll check in with Google X and Udacity founder Sebastian Thrun next. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Mark Crumpton. You're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's check first word news. President Obama says Donald Trump's refusal to say whether he'll concede if he loses next month's election is, quote, not a joking matter. Campaigning for Hillary Clinton Thursday in Florida, the president criticized Trump for repeatedly saying the election system is rigged.
That is dangerous. Because when you try to sow the seeds of doubt in people's minds about the legitimacy of our elections, that undermines our democracy.
Trump tried to make light of the situation. He told a rally in Ohio that he'd accept the election results, quote, if I win. The latest Bloomberg Politics poll asked who should be the face of the Republican Party nationally if Secretary Clinton wins. A plurality, 27%, picked vice presidential nominee Mike Pence. Donald Trump got 24%, ahead of Texas Senator Ted Cruz at 19%, House Speaker Paul Ryan at 15%, and Ohio Governor John Kasich at 10%. Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte in Beijing for meetings with Chinese leaders says he wants to break away from the United States and shift toward China and Russia. The U.S. is the Philippines' biggest military ally. Scientists at the European Space Agency are downplaying the likely loss of the Mars lander. They say a wealth of data sent back before its signal was lost will help them prepare for a future mission. I'm Mark Crumpton. It's just after 6:30 p.m. Thursday here in New York, 9:30 Friday morning in Sydney. My colleague Paul Allen has a look at the markets. Paul, good morning.
Good morning, Mark. It looks like a fairly quiet end to the week across the Asia-Pacific. If we check out New Zealand first, been trading for 90 minutes so far on Friday, currently off about 1/3 of 1%. Futures on the Nikkei indicating a fairly mixed day. Keep an eye on shares in Nissan and Mitsubishi, the car makers. Nissan has completed now its acquisition of a 34% stake of Mitsubishi, paying $2.3 billion for that. Follows Mitsubishi shares taking a beating over the past 12 months. This is to do with the manipulation of data surrounding fuel economy. The Nissan CEO Carlos Ghosn now going to be pulling triple duty, wearing 3 hats as CEO of Nissan, Renault and Mitsubishi as well. Expecting a flat open here in Australia on the ASX. We'll have a watch of BHP shares today. The miner saying it will defend itself against charges connected to the Samarco tailings dam collapse in Brazil. 21 employees of BHP, Vale and Samarco have been charged with murder over that collapse. I'm Paul Allen in Sydney. More of Bloomberg Technology next.
This is Bloomberg Technology live from the Vanity Fair New Establishment Summit in San Francisco. I'm Emily Chang. Tesla CEO Elon Musk is accelerating plans to roll out self-driving cars. In a product announcement Wednesday, Musk said that all upcoming Model 3 sedans will be equipped with fully autonomous technology, but Tesla's existing software, Autopilot, has been under increased scrutiny since a fatal accident in May. Joining me now to discuss the state of the self-driving car revolution, an industry visionary, the inventor of Google's self-driving car, Sebastian Thrun, also CEO and founder of Udacity.
It's great seeing you.
Always great to have you, and I could never forget that we met in Google's self-driving car.
That was amazing, yes. I
5 years ago.
You're a courageous person.
I am, and it's come such a long way since then. We'll get to that.
And it was in the back seat, too.
Yes. What do you make of this turn by Elon Musk?
I'm not surprised at all. It was obviously clear he wanted to build completely self-driving cars, and his autopilot isn't quite good enough that you can not pay attention. He's been very clear about this, but I think the next generation will be good enough that he can just go and sleep.
So does this mean any cars should be semi-autonomous, or is that dangerous?
I don't think it's dangerous if you know what you're doing. I mean, autopilots have been used as devices in planes, and they don't replace pilots at all. They really assist pilots to be better pilots. And the same is true for the autopilot. I keep my eyes on the road all the time. At the same time, once technology is ready to be completely self-driving, we should just see control and do better things than driving in the time.
As usual, Musk is putting some aggressive deadlines on himself. I mean, do you think he can deliver by 2018 with fully autonomous cars?
2018, you mean?
2018, excuse me.
I hope we can deliver. I mean, in Udacity, we are currently building up an entire self-driving car with our students. And I think in 2 to 3 years, it should be possible to do this.
So talk to me a little bit about Google. You obviously worked there for many years. We've seen some people leave that part of the company. Why haven't they shipped a car yet? Why don't they have a car on the road?
Google has done something phenomenal. They're really driving cars every single day in Mountain View and Los Altos, completely autonomous. And they're at the brink of the point where they could even have the cars drive alone. And I don't know what Google's current products plan are today, but I think they have by far the best technology.
But why has it taken so long?
Look, in driving and building completely autonomous self-driving cars, it's like this crazy thing that happens once every 5 years that hicks you up. And there's still enough of those that we're not quite there yet, but we're almost there.
Apple, we have reported, has scaled back their own car plans. As we understand it, they're focusing more on a platform now, not making an actual car. And the Project Titan, as it's called itself, has struggled. What do you make of that?
I would say it would be sad if Apple moved away from the idea of building a car, because Apple is such a phenomenal design company. And when I go to my regular car, there's so many things broken about it. There's so many knobs and so much complexity. I would love for someone like Apple to really carry it through. So I would love to encourage Tim Cook to do it, because it's such a great opportunity as well.
And that's so interesting, because building a car is also, as you know, incredibly complicated.
That's true, but I think Elon Musk has proven the world that a Silicon Valley company can build a great car. And a Tesla is a great car. It's not great in every dimension, but you walk in and you have this amazing display, and you can see maps very large, and there's almost no buttons, and then you hit the autopilot mode and the car drives itself magically. I mean, I think there's innovation possible in this space, and often the innovators come from different angles. They don't come from the established industry, they come from new companies.
So what about Uber, who has been very aggressive and actually has self-driving Ubers on the road in Pittsburgh? You know, what do you see as the future of self-driving cars in ride-sharing, and what do you make of Uber being so aggressive about it?
Well, Travis and other rideshare companies have been very vocal about the fact that if the self-driving car came, and it came in a way that could drive itself empty from one customer to the next, that would be a threat to his business. And he's doing the right thing. He's investing in this new technology because he owns many, many customers right now. But if someone can offer the same services for half the money, then he'd be in trouble.
And you know, Elon Musk has this idea that he will start a ride-sharing network, but it will be based on ownership. So owners will actually lease their cars or lend their cars to this network. Whereas with Uber, it's sort of unclear who actually owns the cars.
I mean, it's a different business model. If you're in the business of selling cars, you like the notion of ownership. If you're in the business of giving people rides, you don't like the notion of ownership. It turns out the idea of transportation as a service, where the car comes to you, picks you up, delivers you, and disappears, is in the end of the day a better idea, because we don't have to own cars, we don't have to park our cars, we don't need parking spots anymore, we can utilize cars much better, we can get the car we want. It's ultimately, I think, the winning idea. So the question is, who's going to be there first?
So let's say 5 years from now, 10 years from now, paint the picture of ownership for me and ride sharing for me. What does it actually look like?
Well, what we want as citizens is transportation. Most of us want to get from A to B. Ride-sharing will be significantly cheaper than ownership. So for most of us, ride-sharing will be the better alternative. It has additional advantages. We don't have to look for parking anymore. We can drop ourselves off in the front of our office door or in front of the restaurant, and we can even be ridden around when we're drunk. So I think these are things that will happen, and it happen first in the big cities like New York and San Francisco, and then eventually percolate into the countryside.
Who wins? Does one company win? Do many companies win?
No, I wish I had a crystal ball. I can tell you, Udacity is now in the business of building self-driving cars. We have thousands of students building an open source repository for self-driving car software. We now have our car driving on parking lots very successfully, and we're just a few weeks in. And we hope within a year we're going to be the same capability as Uber and Google.
And you're offering nano degrees for people who learn self-driving technology.
Yeah, we also train the next generation of people. So if you want to have a job in the industry, come to us. We had 13,000 people applying for admissions in our self-driving car nano degree. Just to put this in proportion, this is more students than Stanford has students.
Where do they want to work, and who's recruiting them? I mean, do they want to go to Tesla? Do they want to go to Apple? Do they want to go to Google?
Well, I can tell you the Valley is currently desperate for finding people.
Yeah.
We have about 14 different hiring partners. We cater to about 50 other companies, from NVIDIA to Intel to many, many firms that are looking to build up their self-driving car teams. It turns out the skill set required to do this is not represented well by any university because it's so brand new. But we have the best of the best from Mercedes and Diddy and many other companies teaching our students how to build a self-driving car.
Just need to clone a lot of mini Sebastian Thruns, apparently.
Do better than that. You can shoot higher than that.
Sebastian Thrun, founder of Udacity. Always great to have you here on the show.
Great seeing
Sebastian,
you.
thanks so much. And I know you're going on stage. We'll be watching. Up next, more of our coverage from the Vanity Fair New Establishment Summit. We'll sit down with the founder of the Cooking Lab, Nathan Myhrvold, former longtime CTO of Microsoft. And this weekend on Bloomberg Television, we'll bring you some of our best interviews from the week, including venture capitalist and Uber board member Bill Gurley. Tune in Saturday. This is Bloomberg. Nintendo unveiled its long-awaited new gaming console, the Switch. In a video release, the company showed off the tablet-like console that'll allow gamers to play at home and on the go. Additionally, the portable part comes with its own screen and 2 detachable controllers, allowing 2 people to play. Shares rose in Tokyo trading after the announcement. The product is expected to go on sale in March. Former Microsoft CTO and Intellectual Ventures co-founder Nathan Myhrvold knows a thing or two about innovation. The visionary tapped on both his passion for food and technology by founding the Cooking Lab, a state-of-the-art research kitchen and laboratory. I sat down with Myhrvold earlier and discussed how technology will impact the future of our food. Take a listen.
We've already seen tremendous change as we import foods from around the world to different places. So when I was a kid, sushi was extremely rare. Now there's sushi in every mall here. Conversely, in Japan, it was rare to get pizza. Now they have plenty of pizza. The interesting thing is we're pretty much done with that kind of a import because most major cities in the world have most every cuisine there is. And maybe there's 1 or 2 little cuisines, but something like sushi or Szechuan food or some other big cultural cuisine is a rare discovery. And we kind of have found all of those. So I think going forward, our need for variety is going to involve invention.
How will we eat differently?
You know, I think the things that people care about in a given era change. There was a period from the 1950s up through the 80s where most consumers were focused on cost and convenience. So TV dinners and frozen food and lots of processed stuff in the supermarket was paramount because the consumer was focused on cheap and convenient. More recently, people have decided, hey, let's also think about healthy. Let's think about delicious. The number of people who consider themselves a foodie is sort of at an all-time high for society, not just in the United States, but around the world. So we're caring a lot more what we eat, and as soon as we care what we eat, the whole food system will sort of realign. So now you can get kale in every restaurant in the country.
So will the kitchen get more high tech?
Well, I think that the American kitchen is ridiculously low tech. Okay, you have people who have supercomputers in their pockets in the form of their cell phone. Their car has dozens of microprocessors in it, and their oven has none. And their oven does actually a pretty poor job even of maintaining temperature. So as consumers search for both convenience and better results, I think digital technology has a huge impact for us because why should all of the skill have to be in you?
Your other business is patents. We've got a big election coming up. What is at stake in the patent world with this presidential election?
I think there is a lot at stake in this election. Neither candidate has any position on patents, and I'm fine with that. Patents are kind of a boring little topic that's super important, and it's important to get right, but I think adding the crazily divisive politics that we've seen in other areas wouldn't help.
Right.
I don't think it helps anywhere, to be honest, but we can't seem to get out of it.
And your company has amassed a lot of patents. It's a controversial tactic. Some people call you a patent troll. Do you see the need for patent reform?
Whenever you use a word like reform, it sounds like it's good.
Yeah.
And with any old piece of legislation or old body of law, there's always ways that you can bring it up to date and make it better. On the other hand, there are a lot of companies that have a dog in this fight and a specific agenda. So the giant tech companies tend to absorb lots of features and functionality from the rest of the world, and they don't want to pay for it. Because there's some companies whose entire business is based on patents, and that's not just me, that's the biotech industry, that's the communications industry, company like Qualcomm. There's other people that basically want to take people's inventions for free. And they can spend a ton of money lobbying and say, oh, we create all these jobs, and don't bother us with the fact that maybe somebody else had that idea and we took it.
That was Intellectual Ventures CEO and Cooking Lab founder Nathan Myhrvold. Tomorrow on Bloomberg, we will look to the skies with the world's largest maker of consumer drones, DJI. We will focus on the launch of the Mavic Pro, new competition with GoPro, and research plans for Silicon Valley. And up next, Alibaba's Single Day in 2015 was the single largest shopping day in history. How do you follow that up? We'll ask President Mike Evans next. This is Bloomberg. Alibaba's most important event of the year, Singles Day, right around the corner. It's become an annual shopping extravaganza for China's largest e-commerce company. But this year, the company is setting its sights abroad, teaming up with Costco and Macy's. I sat down with Alibaba President Mike Evans earlier and asked about his expectations for the year.
Singles Day is the biggest shopping day of the year in China. We kicked it off last night in China with the announcement that David Hill, who's organized Super Bowls and done the Oscars, is going to be directing it for us. Katy Perry is going to be our global ambassador. We have thousands of merchants. We have entertainment. It's going to be a wonderful event that all of China and many different parts of the world will participate in.
I was there last year. You processed $14 billion in merchandise in a single day. What kind of numbers are you expecting this year?
14.3 billion last year, actually. But, you know, it's not about the numbers. The numbers will be big, and they'll be bigger than last year. But what really makes Singles Day a success for us is obviously a large amount of product that changes hands between merchants and consumers. But if the social experience isn't a great event for all the people that participate, then we really haven't achieved what we want, because our e-commerce platform is really a social commerce platform. So it brings people together in a way that they live their life now, which is online, buying things, chat rooms, all sorts of experiences that they haven't had historically. So Singles Day and the Global Shopping Festival is all about the total experience, not just the amount of GMV on the day.
Now, Jack Ma sent a letter to shareholders a couple of weeks ago. It rattled investors momentarily about how, you know, Alibaba really needs to transform. It's not just enough to be an e-commerce company. What does that mean for your job?
For my job, it means that we have to think about the way that retail will change in the future. I think people may have misconstrued his letter. It's the change and the morphing of the retail model in the future that he's referring to.
Part of the reason you are here at Vanity Fair is to dispel some of the untruths and misperceptions about China. And, you know, some people don't even really quite understand what Alibaba does. It is not just the Amazon of China. It's something more, but it's hard for U.S. consumers to understand because there isn't quite an equivalent. What is Alibaba?
Alibaba, particularly for a U.S. consumer, is a combination of Facebook, Google, and Amazon. What do I mean by that? We have a social component to our commerce program. We have a search component in everything that we do. We have an innovation and a cloud component, which reflects the totality of businesses that you see in those three companies. So we do that all in one place. So if you look at what our businesses are today, we have a core commerce platform, we have a big digital media and entertainment platform, and then we have a services and innovation side of the business, which is very important. Everything from travel to ride sharing to involvement in food and food delivery and health, and then AR and VR and all of the technologies of the future that are going to be very important. And those are all enabled by our cloud computing business, our payments business, our logistics business that delivers over 50 million packages a day, and of course our Alimama advertising and merchandising.
Now, we had two investors on stage yesterday, Jim Chanos and Kyle Bass, who say China is in a bubble. There's a massive collapse ahead of us. The banks have 4 times as many toxic assets as the U.S. did before the financial crisis. There's billions and billions of extra square footage of real estate that are not being used. Is China in a bubble? Can the economy continue at the pace it is?
China's not in a bubble. The economy is slowing, but not slow. And the combination or the components of the economy are changing rapidly, from investment in old industrial and manufacturing to services and consumption. And there are too many points that were raised yesterday when I wasn't here to discuss them and debate them in isolation. But what I would love to do is to get both Jim and Kyle to come to our campus and to sit down, and we can help them understand some of the things that they don't understand about China.
GDP is flat or dropping, and yet you say, Jack Ma says, Joe Tsai says that consumers are still spending money. Where's the disconnect?
The disconnect is not understanding that when the economy slows, that not all of the economy is slowing. So parts of the economy in China are slowing, particularly the older industrial and the manufacturing side. But the services and consumption components of the economy are growing very rapidly. So our business grew at almost 60% in the last quarter, year on year. That's because more people were consuming. That Chinese consumer population on our platform is 423 million people with $4.3 trillion of assets, deposits in their bank accounts that are unlevered that they want to consume with. So I think the mismatch is understanding which parts of the economy are slowing, which parts of the economy are growing, and why they're growing. And we have the data and the analytics to support both what we see and also what we believe.
Alibaba President Mike Evans there. Now, in today's tech revolving door, someone revolving in. One of the most renowned VC firms in Silicon Valley, Sequoia Capital, has hired a female investing partner. It's first in the firm's 44-year history. Jess Lee is leaving her position as CEO of Polyvore, a shopping site acquired by Yahoo last year for $230 million. When she starts at Sequoia next month, she will become the 11th partner and one of the youngest at the firm. Sequoia came under fire last year when Chairman Mike Moritz told me that he was trying hard to find a female partner, but that they weren't prepared to, quote, lower their standards. He did later clarify that, saying that he believes there are many women who would flourish in the venture industry. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Tomorrow we are catching up with Unity Technologies CEO John Riccitiello, former Electronic Arts CEO. And remember, all episodes of Bloomberg Tech live streaming on Twitter. That is all for now from San Francisco and the New Establishment Summit. This is Bloomberg.
This is Charlie Rose.
Welcome to the program. We're live from New York, Las Vegas, Washington, D.C., and Santa Barbara, California. Tonight, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump faced off in the final presidential debate of 2016. It took place at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and was moderated by Chris Wallace of Fox News. With just under 3 weeks remaining until Election Day, polls showed Donald Trump losing or trailing badly in nearly every state he must win. Here's a look at some key moments from the debate.
I have met with women who, toward the end of their pregnancy, get the worst news one could get, that their health is in jeopardy if they continue to carry to term, or that something terrible has happened or just been discovered about the pregnancy. I do not think the United States government should be stepping in and making those most personal of decisions.
If you go with what Hillary is saying, in the 9th month, you can take the baby and rip the baby out of the womb of the mother just prior to the birth of the baby. Now, you can say that that's okay, and Hillary can say that that's okay, but it's not okay with me.
What I am also arguing is that bringing undocumented immigrants out from the shadows, putting them into the formal economy will be good, because then employers can't exploit them and undercut Americans' wages. And Donald knows a lot about this. He used undocumented labor to build the Trump Tower. He underpaid undocumented workers, and when they complained, he basically said what a lot of employers do: you complain, I'll get you deported.
Putin, from everything I see, has no respect for this person.
Well, that's because he'd rather have a puppet as president of the United States.
No puppet.
And it's pretty clear.
You're the puppet.
It's pretty clear you won't admit that the Russians have engaged in cyber attacks against the United States of America, that you encouraged espionage against our people.
There are many more important comments made in that debate, which we'll come to. Joining me now from Washington, D.C., Al Hunt of Bloomberg View and Kathleen Parker of the Washington Post. From Santa Barbara, California, Jeff Greenfield of Politico and PBS NewsHour Weekend. Joining us in a few moments from Las Vegas, Mark Halpern and John Heilemann. They are co-managing editors of Bloomberg Politics and co-host of Bloomberg Television's With All Due Respect. Also joining us, John Dickerson, CBS News Political Director, and Katty Kay of the BBC later. And joining me here in New York, Dan Senor of Senor Strategies and Democratic Strategist Steve McMahon. I am pleased to have all of them here. I begin with Al Hunt in Washington and go around the clock here and get response and reaction from this hour-and-a-half debate. Al?
Charlie, I doubt this debate changed a single vote. Solidified bases. The only thing memorable was Donald Trump refusing to say whether he would abide by the election, making Richard Nixon, who actually may have had a grievance, look like Charlie Rose. I mean, it was a really extraordinary moment. But the rest of it, I think, didn't change a thing. And I think the outcome is really baked now, that I can't see any way Trump could make up what I think is probably as much as a 7 or 8 point gap. And this contest, Charlie, Peter Hart, the pollster, said that the Trump race is like a Daytona 400 driver without brakes and a faulty steering wheel. It may careen from place to place, occasionally get close, but you know it was never going to win. And I just think tonight solidified that.
Kathleen.
I don't disagree with anything Al said. I think it was very much a non-game changer. I was excited when Donald Trump created a new word, bigly. I want to add that when I heard him say that twice. You know, the low moment of the evening was when he said he would not necessarily concede the election to Hillary Clinton should she win. And that led to what became, I think, Hillary Clinton's best moment. She gave a very passionate defense of our electoral history and how important it is that we pass the wand from the one to the next with civility and respect. But otherwise, I think, you know, I think most people who pay attention to politics are familiar with the positions that each reiterated tonight. And I think that Hillary came across as very steady and serious.
Yeah, okay.
To Trump's, in his favor, I suppose, he didn't explode, and he wasn't really as thin-skinned as he's been in the past, although he did occasionally refer to Hillary Clinton in a way that wasn't quite quite gentlemanly. I think at one point he said she's a nasty lady or a nasty woman or something to that effect.
All right, let's go from Washington, D.C. to Las Vegas. John Dickerson.
Well, I think the story of the night, if there's, these debates boil down to one moment, and it was when Donald Trump said he wasn't sure whether he was going to accept the outcome of the election. I think the reason that's a moment for tonight, and there were plenty of other moments we can talk about, but the question of the Trump campaign is it going to be a change campaign? And that's a lot of the energy behind his campaign, is that the people want to change Washington and see him as their champion. But there is also the question of chaos, which Jeb Bush used to call him the chaos candidate. And when you start to question one of the fundamental principles of the peaceful transfer of power, because it helps you politically, then that moves over from just being a change candidate to being more of a chaos candidate. And it's not just the specific response to that question and the question of whether the election will be legitimate, but it's also just his habit of behavior that in a pinch, this goes to temperament, I guess, is what Republicans who I'm emailing with are talking about, is what his instinct is in a moment like this. And this is a chaotic thing to say in response to that question.
Jeff Greenfield in Santa Barbara.
Well, I think, if you talk about the debate, other than that moment, it's kind of like, apart from that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? Although I would point out, that Al Gore in 2000, and I think you're going to hear this from the Trump campaign, if this election comes down to 537 votes in a state, there may well be a contest. It's the sense, I think, that he keeps talking about a rigged system that everybody's responding to. I have to say, for the first 30 minutes, I thought, oh, Donald Trump has come prepared to debate like a regular candidate. He had a very low-pitched voice. He actually cited some specifics like the Heller decision. He had a very good line when Hillary Clinton was talking about the Russian hacks, and he said, very nice pivot off the open borders. And then it was like watching something on a stove begin to simmer and then ultimately boil up and spill over. He began to interrupt. Once again, provoking Donald Trump inevitably gets the same response, which is that he defends himself to the point where he didn't even remember to attack Hillary Clinton for helping to discredit the women who had accused her husband of misbehavior, even when Chris Wallace gave him that opening. So I think what you've got here is a debate where if we had 6 more debates, it's possible that Donald Trump could actually behave like a real candidate for 90 whole minutes. But sharks got to swim and bats got to fly, and this is who Donald Trump is. And it sure didn't seem to me that he helped himself much.
Dan?
I thought he did better on style than he's ever done before in any of these debates.
He's actually gone a little bit better for each debate.
Yeah, I thought it was his best debate. However, despite doing a little better on style, I just agree with Jeff and Kathleen and John. The comment about, it wasn't just that he said, I'm not sure if I will concede the election. He almost made light of it all, and he says, I'm going to keep people in suspense, as though it's a game.
Yeah, exactly.
And I just think, if he had to do one thing tonight, if I were advising him, I'm not. If he were to do one thing tonight, it is to reassure people that he has the temperament to do the job and say, I may have said some crazy things in this election, but somehow reassure them tonight. This is sort of the closing moment, the last time he'll command an audience of this size, that he has the temperament to do the job. And I think that statement alone, not just the not willing to concede, but almost making a joke of the chaos that's to come.
Listening to his own rules.
Right, and I just think it's a reminder that we are headed after November. Many of us had hoped that if Trump were to lose, the sort of chaos of Trump would also sort of fade. And I don't think that's the case anymore, especially after tonight. I think it's another reminder that the months after this election are going to make the sort of Obama years and the tensions between President Obama and the Republican Congress seem sort of quaint and functional. I think we're headed for a stressful period.
So in fact, we were talking about earlier, there'd be maybe 2 separate splits in Washington, one with the Democrats and one with the Republicans.
Yeah, I think you can already see it starting to emerge on the Republican side. Donald Trump seems to be setting up something for after the election that doesn't involve being president and does involve continuing to represent these aggrieved people that supported him in the primaries.
And cheer him at rallies.
And cheer him at rallies. Many people have speculated about what that might be. Maybe it's a new cable channel or something else, a Breitbart kind of Trump thing. But whatever it is, it's clear, based on what he's been doing in the rallies, based on what he's been saying publicly, and even what he did tonight, when he said he basically wouldn't, or maybe wouldn't accept the results of this election because he wants to continue to lead this aggrieved movement. On the Democratic side, I think, the progressives have come in line, and and Bernie Sanders has been an absolute trooper, and he's been out there, and he's been great in every respect for Hillary Clinton. I think if Hillary Clinton tries to get things done in Washington, which could involve working with Republicans, it's going to be difficult because a lot of those progressives are going to say, we're not here to compromise, we're not here to cut deals. We won, and we expect to get ours. That's going to be a difficult thing to navigate for her. I expect she's going to win, and I expect that, she's going to probably have, in all likelihood, unless Trump continues to melt down, one House of Congress that she's still going to have to kind of deal with on the Republican side.
If in fact Republicans are still in control in the House, and Paul Ryan is still Speaker, is he prepared to deal with the caucus that John Boehner had to deal with?
Well, it's going to be a much different caucus because the size of it will shrink. And the Freedom Caucus, right, and many of the sort of Trump troops within Congress is actually going to grow. So he's going to have a much different conference to manage.
More difficult?
Yes, absolutely. And they're going to feel like, I mean, the sentiment you're hearing more and more is for 8 years, we got kind of rolled by the Obama administration. We're not about to get rolled by the Clinton administration, especially against the backdrop, what Boehner never had to deal with, and Ryan over the past year, what the new Republican leadership, or the Republican leadership that continues on after this election, is going to have to deal with is constituents of Republican members of Congress, Republican constituents of Republican members of Congress being fed this narrative every day that the election was rigged, that the election was stolen. So how is the Republican leadership going to negotiate with a President Clinton when Republican members of Congress in their own conference are being told every day that Hillary Clinton's election was illegitimate? I think it sets up a very dangerous dynamic.
We've been joined now by Mark Halperin and John Heilemann. Reflect in terms of where you are in Las Vegas and what happened in the spin room and how it's seen from there. Mark, I'll begin with you.
Well, I think if Donald Trump had not suggested he wouldn't accept the results of the election, his team could have come out of here hardened. I think he had his best debate, but he didn't do much, wouldn't have done much to change the dynamic, because she was flawless in the sense that she didn't create any negative moments. She evaded some questions, but she was very polished, and she had some moments of genuine passion that I think would have played quite well for a lot of Americans. The problem that Donald Trump has, as effective as he was talking about his core message of change and of Hillary Clinton being part of the establishment and the status quo, by saying he wouldn't accept the results of the election, which here in the spin room his advisors are trying to walk back in various ways, he's left a single giant headline that's he's going to be asked about, his campaign will be asked about, and it really is going to blot out any of the progress he might have made on some issues tonight.
So why do you think he did it, Mark?
I'm certain it's not the answer they rehearsed. I think that he's constantly gaming things out. You know, Mike Pence, right yes. before the debate, Mike Pence did a round of interviews, including with Bloomberg and others, in which he said, of course we'll accept the results. His daughter Ivanka this afternoon did an interview with Nancy Gibbs at Time Magazine, said, of course we'll accept the results. So I don't know why he did it, but it will go down as part of a long string of inexplicable things Donald Trump has done. And again, I'll say, I thought he clearly had his best debate, although she was quite strong as well.
Charlie, I would like to, I'd like to at least hazard an opinion or a guess about why he said it. Which is that he believes it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I was going to say. What's in his heart at this point. I'm of the school of Occam's razor here. This is a guy who spent the last week talking about the election being rigged, warning his supporters that the election was going to be stolen from him, saying things that were just manifestly at odds with the truth and any research that's been done about the prevalence of voter fraud in America, just making these arguments over and over again. Throughout the week, a variety of his advisors, his surrogates, and so on have tried to walk that back and say, no, he's just saying that the media is biased against him. And every time they say that, he sends out a tweet or stands up on a stage someplace and repudiates them effectively and says, no, he's talking about voter fraud. So now Donald Trump gets up and he gets asked the question directly, and I'm sure Kellyanne Conway and many of the people around him prepared him and said, don't say that you're not going to accept the results of this election. And yet he said he's not going to accept suggested he wouldn't necessarily accept the results of the election, which is obviously a massive transgression against any kind of democratic norms that govern our presidential process, something none of us in our lifetimes have ever seen any presidential candidate or presidential nominee ever say. And as Mark said, the immediate political effect is horrible for him because it is the only thing anybody's talking about here and the only thing anybody's going to be talking about tomorrow. But I think that he may keep going on saying this because he genuinely thinks that the election is rigged.
Secretary Clinton was, I thought, incredibly effective when she pointed out that whenever he loses at anything, he says the thing's rigged. He loses the Iowa caucuses, he says they're rigged. Wisconsin primary was rigged. She even brought up that he didn't win an Emmy Award and claimed the Emmys were rigged.
Right. Katty Kay joins us now from the BBC. Katty, your response, your reaction? Everybody's talking about, can't accept necessarily the results of the election until he'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to be Miss Goody Two-Shoes about this, but we've just seen the value of doing your homework, and Hillary Clinton did her homework going into this debate, and Donald Trump didn't. So on a whole range of issues that he'd brought up in previous debates, she had very compelling responses. We just heard her there on how, she could come back at him and say he said everything was rigged, how she came back at him with answers for what she spent doing in her 30 years in public office. She had a very strong answer to women about women's health issues and how Donald Trump denigrates women. So I think, throughout this debate, she was prepped, she was ready. I thought this was one of her stronger performances, but in a sense, that doesn't matter either, because all anyone's going to be talking about here tonight and tomorrow is that Donald Trump has suggested that he won't accept the results of a Democratic election. I have to say, Charlie, I've just been on the BBC. That's all they're talking about around the world listening to this as well. The idea for other countries that you could have a major candidate in an American election say that they won't accept the results when you are held up as the beacon, as the example of how democracy passes from one party to another in this peaceful, extraordinary day in a cold January, and that Donald Trump has suggested that he won't accept that. That's troubling to a lot of America's allies, as well as other powers as well, watching this.
Let me go to Jeff Greenfield and talk about one of the issues that was discussed, which was, and all of you jump in, Russia and the relationship with Putin. How did you see that conflict coming out? Jeff?
Well, it was absolutely remarkable because, once again, Hillary Clinton took what could have been a liability for her. You know, all those leaked statements about open borders and the various other things that have caused some embarrassment, flipped it immediately to the fact that Russia was attempting to influence our elections, and Trump, you know, once again, I don't know Putin, he's not a friend of mine, what's wrong with getting along with him? And it meant, in effect, quite ironically, if you think of the last 50 or 60 years of how American politics goes, that the Democratic candidate for president is accusing the Republican candidate for president of being soft on Russia. That is a flip from several decades back in the old days. And it was, to me, another example of where, by that time in the debate, Trump was beginning to feel aggrieved. And as people have pointed out, when you pick on him, substance goes out the window, and what he has to do is to defend himself. And it caused a situation where Hillary Clinton, who could have been vulnerable about what was in many of those leaked documents, managed to make it a case of this autocratic regime is trying to screw our elections.
It almost, Charlie, seemed like Hillary Clinton had prepared to the point where she knew exactly what he was going to hit her with, and she was ready. Dan and I actually watched it in the green room together, and we were remarking it took her 33 minutes to get Donald Trump to kind of start to lose it. And that's about as long as it took in the first debate. He had a pretty good 30 minutes in the first debate, and then he got angrier and more agitated, and he started behaving badly and finally lost it. In this debate, it was at moment 33 that he started to lose it. And she was like a prize fighter who opened a cut and just kept hitting it and hitting it and hitting it.
When I was working on debate prep during the primaries, I was involved with Rubio's debate prep. You know, we had a lot of reps. You know, there were a lot of debates during the primaries. And we just saw over time, it was like pushing certain buttons. There were like 6 or 7 buttons that you could push that were an attack on him that he was extremely sensitive about. And regardless of the opportunities he had to move away from the attack and go on offense himself, he always engaged it. He always sort of took the bait. Yeah. And Secretary Clinton has figured this out, and you've seen this in every debate, including tonight. Now, you know, Steve, it took a half hour or so, but she did push the button successfully, and he just went down these rabbit holes.
And especially also on the question of what have you been doing for 30 years? Right. You know, she basically, I was doing this for children, and I was doing this. Right. You were, on the other hand, discriminating against people.
Yeah, I was hunting down bin Laden, and you were like hosting the Celebrity Apprentice.
Yeah. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
Kathleen, on the issue of abortion, any surprises there in terms of the language that Trump used?
Well, yeah, I thought the language was pretty harsh. We know that late-term abortion is a very emotional, kind of divisive issue, and but Hillary Clinton